You are stepping into a high-level strategic policy session right now. I mean, we're looking at March 2024 when India signed this really massive historic trade agreement with four European nations.
Right, the TIPA deal.
Exactly, the Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement. And it's a complex treaty that took, what, 15 agonizing years to negotiate? But the wild part is, the one thing that makes up over 80% of what Europe actually sells to India, which is gold, was completely left out of the deal.
Yeah, completely untouched.
Not a single % drop in import duty. So today's mission in this deep dive is to extract the exact frameworks and, the critical evaluations you need to master this topic for any strategic analysis or exam scenario. We're exploring why ignoring billions of dollars in Swiss gold was actually, well, the smartest strategic move India could have made.
It really was. And, that gold exception, it tells you basically everything you need to know about how the architecture of global trade is shifting right now.
Yeah.
Because this isn't just the standard agreement about moving boxes of goods across borders with slightly lower taxes. We are looking at the first time in the history of free trade agreements where a developing nation secured a legally binding commitment for targeted investment.
Right, and job creation, too.
Exactly. Job creation directly from the developed world. It's a huge structural shift.
And that is exactly what we are going to unpack today for you. Because if you need to understand the mechanics of international trade, or, if you just want to know how global economic leverage actually works behind closed doors, this deep dive is definitely for you.
We're basically going to act as your senior instructors today, breaking down a stack of policy briefings and government frameworks.
So let's start with the background layer, the who and the how long. Set the stage for us. Why did this take a 15-year marathon to finish?
Well, you have to look at the players. The deal is between India and EFTA, which is the European Free Trade Association. And for anyone fuzzy on their European economic blocks, EFTA is not the European Union.
Right, it's four distinct nations, right? Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland.
Spot on. These are countries that they wanted the economic benefits of European free trade, but they didn't want to hand over their political sovereignty to the EU Parliament in Brussels.
Makes sense.
And they are highly industrialized, incredibly wealthy, and deeply integrated into global supply chains.
Which kind of makes that 15-year negotiation timeline make a lot more sense, honestly. You have India, a massive, rapidly developing economy, trying to find common ground with four of the wealthiest per capita nations on Earth.
The friction there is just immense. I mean, traditional free trade agreements are usually pretty straightforward. Like, I lower my tariffs on your cars, you lower your tariffs on my textiles.
Just tit for tat.
Exactly. But when you have a per capita income in India hovering around, $2,500, and the per capita income in Switzerland or Norway is like $60,000 to $70,000.
A traditional tariff swapping deal would just be disastrous.
It would completely crush the developing nation. The domestic industries would just get wiped out by heavily subsidized, highly advanced European competitors.
Oh, okay, so that sets up the central problem perfectly. How do you integrate economies with such a massive income disparity without destroying your own local economy? And the answer, it seems, is the headline number of this entire treaty. Let's get into the facts and data memory layer.
Right, the big target. This is the crucial statistic you have to memorize. EFTA has legally committed to promoting $100 billion in foreign direct investment, or FDI, into India.
Over 15 years, right?
Over 15 years, yes. And they tied a human capital target to it as well, which is the generation of 1 million direct jobs in India as a result of those investments.
Wait, okay, $100 billion from private European companies into India. But, how does a government sign a treaty promising what private corporations will do? Like, the Swiss government can't legally force a private Swiss pharmaceutical company to build a factory in Mumbai.
They can't. And that is the absolute genius of the enforcement mechanism built into PIPA. It's an institutional framework called the Rebalance Clause.
Rebalance Clause. Okay, underline that keyword, everyone.
Right. So the EFTA governments aren't forcing the companies, but they are saying, we will create the ultimate frictionless environment for your capital to flow into India.
Okay.
But if, after a specified review period, that $100 billion target isn't materializing, India has the strict legal right to suspend or reverse the duty concessions it gave to those four countries.
Oh, wow. So it's basically a built-in safety valve. India's saying, we will open our doors, but if the money and the jobs don't actually show up, we just close the doors back up.
Exactly. It completely flips the leverage. It moves us from passive free trade to active investment-linked trade. It's a massive governance reform in how these treaties work.
Okay, let's pivot to the actual doors that are opening, the tariffs. Because the briefing materials note EFTA is offering 92.2% of its tariff lines, and India is offering 82.7%. And instead of just, throwing percentages around, I like to think of a tariff line as a giant itemized national receipt of every single thing a country could possibly import.
That's a really great way to visualize it. Everything from like a specific type of ballpoint pen to a jet engine has its own individual line on that massive receipt.
Yeah.
So when EFTA offers 92.2% of its tariff lines, they're essentially taking 92% of the items on that list and dropping the import taxes to zero. And for India, that covers 99.6% of their current exports to those nations.
But India is only offering 82.7% of its lines in return, so they are intentionally holding back about 17%. Which brings us back to our opening hook, right? The gold exception.
Yes, the gold exception.
Because more than 80% of everything EFTA exports to India is gold, mostly from Switzerland. If you were signing a massive free trade agreement, why intentionally exclude the single biggest thing you buy from them?
Because of macroeconomic stability. Gold is a massive revenue stream for the Indian government through import duties. It also has a huge impact on India's current account deficit.
So dropping it would be risky.
Very. If you drop the duty on Swiss gold to zero, you might see a massive surge in gold imports. That drains foreign exchange reserves and can completely destabilize the local currency.
So the negotiators ring-fenced it. They looked at the giant receipt, circled gold, and said, nope, this stays untouched.
They did, and EFTA accepted it because, well, they understand that an economically unstable India is a terrible place to invest their $100 billion.
Right, that makes sense.
Plus, EFTA has secured 100% market access for non-agricultural products, so they get tariff concessions on precision machinery, pharmaceuticals, high-end consumer goods.
Okay, so phased out customs duties over 10 years on high-quality Swiss watches, chocolates, biscuits. I mean, cheaper Swiss chocolate sounds like a win to me, but that's obviously not the strategic core of the treaty.
No, the consumer goods are just a nice bonus. The engine here is technology and manufacturing. That $100 billion in FDI is earmarked for infrastructure, precision engineering, renewable energy, and health sciences.
So it plugs directly into Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India. They're using foreign capital to build domestic capability.
Exactly. It's a capacity-building strategy.
Now, what about people? Because TAPA has 14 chapters, it's not just moving boxes. The service sector is a massive pillar of the Indian economy. So what do the MRAs, the mutual recognition agreements, actually look like on the ground?
Well, let's use an example. Imagine an architect trained and licensed in Mumbai. Before TAPA, if they wanted to move to Oslo to design buildings, they'd hit a massive regulatory wall.
Because Norway wouldn't recognize their degree, right?
Exactly. They'd have to go through years of expensive recertification. But with an MRA, these countries sit down and legally agree to recognize each other's professional qualifications.
So India offered, 105 subsectors?
Yes, and secured commitments in up to 128 subsectors from Switzerland, 114 from Norway, so that Mumbai architect or a nurse or a chartered accountant can now take their expertise directly into these high-income markets.
Wow. So it transforms human capital into a highly mobile global export.
And I should also mention, TAPA incorporates human rights and sustainable development. Modern trade treaties are legally intertwining commerce with ethical considerations and green standards now.
You really have to meet their green standards if you want access to their capital. Okay, let's look at the significance analysis. I keep looking at Switzerland here, not just as a trading partner, but as a base camp, like a springboard to scale the European Union market.
That is a brilliant strategic connection to make, because statistically, over 40% of Switzerland's global services exports go directly to the EU.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they have the financial pipelines and regulatory alignment already built. So Indian companies can use Switzerland to expand their reach. Plus, this deal reinforces India's image as a free trade champion, creating a template for future deals with the UK and the EU.
Okay, I want to play devil's advocate for a second. Let's do the critical evaluation layer.
Go for it.
This David versus Goliath setup. Even with the gold exception, if you open up over 80% of your tariff lines to the most advanced economies, aren't you going to wipe out millions of local Indian workers? I'm thinking specifically about small-scale farming.
You absolutely would if you didn't have an exclusion list.
Hmm.
And this is a massive analytical point. Sensitive sectors like agriculture, dairy, soya, and coal are strictly on the exclusion list. No duty concessions there.
So a Swiss dairy conglomerate can't just flood the Indian market with zero tariff milk.
Right. The strategy invites competition in areas where India wants tech transfer, but throws a protective shield over vulnerable sectors.
Okay, what about pharmaceuticals? Because there's a threat buried in here called data exclusivity, or DE. What is it, and why is it a threat to India's generic drug industry?
Data exclusivity is a major ethical and technological concern. It acts as an intellectual property barrier, but, and this is key, it is completely separate from a patent.
Break that down for me. How is DE different from a patent?
When a pharma company invents a drug, a patent protects the chemical recipe for, say, 20 years. But to sell it, they have to run extensive clinical trials to prove it's safe. Data exclusivity protects the data from those trials.
Okay, so when the 20-year patent expires, an Indian generic drug maker should be able to use the recipe to make a cheaper version, right?
In theory. But if a trade agreement enforces strict data exclusivity, the generic manufacturer is legally barred from using the original safety data to get regulatory approval.
Wait, really? So they would have to run their own multi-million-dollar clinical trials from scratch, even without a patent?
Exactly. It delays cheap generic medicines like HIV therapies and biologics. It's a backdoor way to extend monopolies.
That is huge. So DE could really threaten public health access.
It's a massive point of tension. India managed to navigate it here, but it's a constant threat. And then you also have non-tariff barriers, or NTBs.
NTBs. Those are the differing product standards and technical regulations, right? Like bringing the wrong plug adapter to Europe, but on an industrial scale.
That's a perfect analogy. We can eliminate import taxes, but if an Indian agricultural product has to meet impossibly different packaging standards in Iceland compared to Norway, it's a massive implementation challenge.
Okay, so let's synthesize this. We are moving into the answer writing conversion mentorship session. If you are listening to this and need to write a high-scoring answer or brief your team on TEPA tomorrow, here is your framework. Let's start with a 150-word structure.
All right, for 150 words, your introduction needs to define TEPA and establish the $100 billion 15-year baseline.
Got it. And the body arguments.
3 main points. First, investment and job creation. Second, service sector mobility, specifically mentioning the MRAs. And third, the EU market springboard.
And what's the way ahead to conclude that short answer?
Navigating those non-tariff barriers and protecting generic pharma from data exclusivity.
Perfect. Now, what if they need a deeper 250-word analytical structure?
Start with the context, then break it into dimensions, so economic, strategic, and technological.
Okay, then move into challenges, right?
Yes. Discuss data exclusivity, the income gap, and domestic resistance. Finally, provide recommendations. Use administrative vocabulary here. Recommend regulatory reforms, public-private partnerships for R&D, and institutional strengthening to actually monitor that $100 billion target.
And the keywords to underline on your paper?
PIPA, MRAs, rebalance clause, data exclusivity, and non-tariff barriers.
This gives you a complete 360-degree view. You don't just understand what happened, you understand the recurring governance patterns. Which brings us to the final revision capsule.
Let's do a rapid-fire 30-second last-minute revision. 5 must-remember facts. The $100 billion FDI target, 1 million jobs, the 15-year negotiation, the 4 EFTA nations, and the untouched gold duty.
Nice. Give me one probable exam question.
Critically analyze the India-EFTA TEPA in the context of India's strategic push towards Atmanirbhar Bharat and global supply chain integration.
And the 5 analytical keywords to drop in that answer.
Investment-linked trade, strategic autonomy, data exclusivity, sectoral exclusion, and multipolarity.
Incredible. This has been a masterclass in global trade mechanics. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to return to that enforcement mechanism we discussed earlier, the rebalance clause.
Right, the safety valve.
Because the idea that a government can legally suspend international trade concessions if private foreign corporations don't hit an investment target is just mind-blowing.
It really redefines the relationship between state policy and private capital.
It does. So I'll leave you with this final lingering thought to explore on your own. If an international trade agreement can now be actively suspended by a state because private investors fail to act as promised, how does this completely redefine the concept of state sovereignty? And more importantly, does this give developing nations the ultimate new weapon for leverage in the global marketplace?